Hello, welcome everybody. I'm Alessandro Levi, electrical engineer and partner at Prime Movers Lab.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kenny Lauer. I'm thrilled that you're here. I am an ecosystem and experience partner at Prime Movers Lab.
Together, we'll be moderating today's discussion on the future of engagement, metaverse, and technology enablers. I'd like to start by welcoming our audience. I see many of our limited partners, founders, and extended Prime Movers Lab family. For those new to Prime Movers Lab, we are a deep tech venture firm investing in prime movers, the entrepreneurs that have the ability to positively impact billions of lives. We focus on breakthrough science companies in 6 broad industry verticals: transportation, energy, agriculture, human augmentation, manufacturing, and infrastructure. Given this, we live on the front lines of hard tech innovation. We have seen over 2,200 companies so far this year. Every two weeks, we host webinars to share what we are learning, to spotlight growing industries, and highlight the amazing people that are speeding up the massive adoption of technology that you are starting to currently use or will we use in the future. This is actually our last webinar for the year at Prime Movers Lab.
Okay, and let's go ahead and let me just take you through some quick housekeeping things, just 3 things to keep in mind. The first is we absolutely want to respect everyone's time, so we're going to keep this to an hour. The second is that Alessandro and I, we're going to lead this fun discussion for about 30 minutes, and then we're going to open it up for all of you to ask questions. And the third is Q&A, and this is where I get most excited. So I've been in this remote and immersive engagement space for 30 plus years, and I've used and worked with many of the people and technologies involved in the metaverse. So AR, VR, hologram, video interaction. And I've got to tell you, we have got a really expert panel, a panel with opinions and perspectives. So please, sorry guys, but please take advantage of them. Alessandro and I would much rather have them answer your questions than ours, because this webinar is for you, not for us. So, and don't wait for 30 minutes to send your questions. So please use your chat, use QA. We're going to be monitoring it, and then we'll bring forward the questions. So please take advantage of this opportunity. That's all. Back to you, Alessandro.
Yeah, just a quick introduction to the topic. In the post-Cold War in 1994, a company called TerraVision developed a 3D mapping software technology, creating a networked virtual representation of Earth using satellite images. Then came Google Earth, and recently there is also a Netflix short series talking about it. The first recorded use of the word metaverse is in Neil Stephenson's 1992 novel Snow Crash. The word metaverse was first coined in the early 1990s, and the notion of immersive digital reality separate from the physical world can be traced back to the 80s video games. Across the 2000s, technology developed in leaps and bounds to give birth to digital twin technology in 2002, and Second Life, for example, in 2003. In the next few years, games like Pokemon Go and trends like non-fungible tokens further blurred the lines between virtual and real. But we at Prime Movers Lab, we are a deep tech fan. We believe that to make a truly immersive digital experience, there must be a breakthrough with the existing hardware. And today, we have 3 pioneers as panelists to discuss all these topics and much more. Okay, too much for now. Let's dig into the webinar.
All right, thanks, Alessandro. Let's go ahead and meet our panelists. I sound like Michael Buffer. The first one is a 7-time TEDx speaker on the 40 under 40 list, the Silicon Valley Business Journal, co-founder and CEO of Brelyon. Please, everyone, meet Barmak Heshmat.
Thank you so much, Kenny and Alessandro. Hi, everyone. I'm Barmak, CEO of Brelyon, and really glad to be on this panel. I'm excited to talk about what is our take on the future of metaverse and how we are innovating on the hardware side and user experience of the computers.
All right, thank you, Barmak. I really appreciate that. Our next panelist has dedicated his career to innovation in live action cinema and visual effects post-production and most relevant light field technology. He's the co-founder and CEO of Lightfield Lab. Everyone, please meet John Karafin.
Hey, everybody. Absolutely thrilled to be on the panel with such experts, and really excited to share our vision of the future, which is bringing real objects into the real world and doing that with just photons of light.
Wow, fantastic. And last but not certainly least, Metaverse OG, creator of the Metaverse. He has a great Metaverse manifesto, if you haven't read it, called The 7 Rules for the Metaverse. Global head of AR and VR ads and e-commerce at Unity Technologies, my good friend Tony Parisi.
Hey, Kenny, thank you for that warm introduction. If you folks don't know about Unity, it is the prevailing game engine platform that's used to make most mobile games. We also have a massive global advertising platform that helps our publishers make money. And we're getting into things beyond gaming. Folks are using the Unity engine to make VR, AR, basically anything that could target any interactive real-time 3D environment. So I'll be the representative software person on the panel. As Kenny mentioned, I got a long background in metaverse-y stuff. I arguably wrote the first piece of code that you could call metaverse code, in the sense that it was 3D tied to the World Wide Web. Different people will measure that differently. That was back in the mid-90s, so I'm dating myself. And I met Kenny, I believe it was 5 years ago. Was it 2016 or was it 20? No, it's 2015, 6 years ago.
Yep.
On my birthday at a panel for the Television Academy Interactive Division in San Francisco. They brought me a birthday cake. That was kind of fun. And we've been fast friends ever since. This guy that who's the VP of marketing at the Golden State Warriors, I was like, what is this guy gonna know? And then he blew my mind on all this crazy deep stuff, and we've been fast friends ever since. So thank you for having me, Kenny, and I'm excited to be chatting with John and Barmak as well. This is going to be a really fun panel.
All right, thank you, Tony.
Awesome. So the first question that we have for you guys to warm up this webinar is, if we consider entertainment, gaming, work, or global communication, which product came out in the past years that you are more excited about?
I'll go first. I'm just going to put it out there. What would we have done without Zoom? I mean, all the video conferencing systems, but Unity had been a Zoom beta user for a couple of years before that, and thank goodness we had platforms like that around over this last almost 2 years now. And while it's just kind of giving us a little pinhole into what a possible global communication system like the Metaverse could be, the ability we have to do this even with our talking head set up here has really been, I'd say, probably a lifesaver during these last 2 years.
I also want to give a different answer to that question, Alessandro. I haven't been excited about the hardware market for kind of a long time, to be honest. Like, everything seems very incremental these days, and there's such a monopoly that it's really hard for smaller companies to introduce something new, and I would say headsets are probably the place where still some experimentation is really happening, and there's risk taking, and it kind of feels like the early days of cell phones where you have those bricks in your hand and things like that. But other than that, I mean you look at the laptop and cell phone market, and it feels very saturated, to be honest.
I have a completely tangential answer. I think about Zoom and think about all the other headsets, and then I think about COVID, what would we be doing? And because we also build a lot of hardware here, we had to physically be here. How do we keep our team safe? And shockingly, things like Uber Eats were lifesavers. I know that's not the metaverse, but it's kind of indirectly the metaverse, but it was the way that we were able to still have our team be safe, bring food in, keep everybody focused and working. And for us, it wasn't about the telepresence, it was about the physical presence.
Okay. And okay, if we consider, for example, Zoom headset, of course, there are great technologies that help us to be more focused, to collaborate, to work together. But do you think there are some limitations in these type of technologies? How can we enhance the experience? Tell us more.
So I can jump in. So is the question, do I feel like you are right here in the room with me? And the answer is, well, no, obviously. So for telepresence, there's so many challenges in terms of the engagement. And I'm not sure for all the attendees, if you have that same challenge of the eye lines aren't matching. It's very clear that I'm not physically in the room with you. You can't read the micro expressions on my face. You really don't get that exact same experience of being in person. And I can't tell you how important it was when we started hosting people back here at our lab, the experience that it is to be face to face. And that social interaction, the social shared experience is so huge and critical. And part of our vision is all about bringing people back into those real environments, even if it is all driven with software, and doing so in a way that it's identical to the thing that you would have seen in the real world. So if and when we're successful bringing that vision into this world, if you can imagine being in this panel, but seeing everybody around the room with you, but not having headsets and other accessories on. So that's our little, I'll call it biased view of the world for telepresence.
Can I riff off that a little bit, Alessandro?
Yeah.
I don't know if folks have seen this company Scatter. They have this product called Depth Kit, but they're trying to invest in the capture side of this to be able to get us to be present with each other. I mean, they have entertainment applications for this, but they're also looking at now being able to stream this for real-time video conferencing. And what they do is it's a couple of Connects, it's basically, and someday it's going to be iPads and iDevices. It'll be, smaller than that, that can capture us in real time. Their original incarnations were sort of point cloud rendered, super stylized, because those were tech limitations there. But we've gotten to a point now, there you go, John, you're back. We've gotten to a point now where their rendering is getting better and better, and they're able to actually give us textured meshes that look somewhat like us and streamed in real time. So to me, if we could enhance that, have that presence, have even more sophisticated displays like John's talking about, we get into a really interesting realm for teleconferencing.
I want to sort of categorize this in different levels of immersion and telepresence. It's kind of really a spectrum, and we are still at the sort of early days of that spectrum. And in terms of your question, is there any limitations? I mean, absolutely, there are some fundamental limitations that are very challenging to sort of overcome. For example, sending sound over and video over, and then making that video 3D and giving you a panoramic view of that remote environment is kind of like easier things that is very within the grasp of our technology in coming 5 years or so. But when you're talking about actually doing like physical collaboration remotely, John probably understands this very well, because we run hardware companies, and people have to be in the lab and actually assembling things and testing things. And how are you going to digitize that? Are you going to have like robots doing the work remotely? That's going to be a very expensive solution. And then you go even one level further, like the eating experience, or just dancing experience together, or something like that, which is very physical. It becomes harder and harder to really replace real presence with sort of digital representation of telepresence, basically. So I would say there's kind of like like the autonomous cars, where there's like level 1 to level 5. I think someone should come over and say, there's a level 1 to level 5 of telepresence, and we are right now at level 2. We'll probably start sort of transitioning to level 3, but level 4 and 5 becomes really hard to be able to actually hit.
I love that, Barmak. Yeah, someone should do that, and also think about to what end, because how much of that do we actually want to have as telepresence?
Yes, exactly.
How much is this tech going to be about enhancing the physical world and making that better for us?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, if this metaverse is, and Tony, you can probably talk to this. What is this metaverse thing? I mean, obviously, it's entered into the common lexicon now a lot, because of Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook, but certainly it's been evolving ever since. I go back even to stuff you were doing, Tony, but as well as Second Life, and even if you look at some of the technologies that are happening right now, certainly fall into how much of this, what is this metaverse? I was thinking, I could define it, but I've got people here who know how to define it. Is we know it's 3D, we know it has spatial capabilities, and we know it involves somewhat of a parallel universe. But is there just one metaverse, or is there multi metaverses? Is it the metaverse or a metaverse? And what is actually going to happen in there? And what's the expectations? And where are we in terms of this really happening?
So that's a lot. I'll start since I wrote the rant, the 7 rules. And that was largely in response to basically everybody coming out and being a pundit about this stuff. All of a sudden, a bunch of differences of opinion, a bunch of uses of nomenclature that are sort of nonsensical in my view. And my piece is equally opinionated, by the way. It's just informed by a few decades of grinding away at this. And coming at it as a technologist, ethnologist, thinking about the use cases, not talking about philosophy or any of this other stuff. The original term was coined by Neil Stephenson, as Alessandro said, and the Wikipedia definition sort of follows that along, which is that it's a 3D internet. Everything else is sort of up for grabs. And there's plenty of schools of thought already bouncing around the Twitter webs and everywhere else about, hey, is this like, is AR, is it, physically, computers enhancing the physical world? Is that even the metaverse? John Hankey's got an opinion about that coming from Niantic. Other people think it's the full-on cartoon escape into VR headsets that it seems like, Facebook is advocating. Some of us are a little less restrictive about that. And again, my gloss is coming from real-time 3D making our lives better, however it can. The internet evolving to be more plastic, more fun, more magical. Obviously, that's going to have implications with hardware. It's going to be experienced through new types of hardware. I can't wait to hear what John and Barmak have to say about this. But it also does need to be accessible through our phones. Otherwise, the barrier to entry is ridiculous and no one's going to be able to use this for another decade. So to me, I have a very broad and inclusive version of what that means, but it stops at anything that doesn't interoperate with anything else. It needs to be based on things that are open, that can communicate with each other, because it's about communication. We wouldn't be having this conversation if we didn't have an open infrastructure for video and websites and everything else. And the metaverse will follow similar patterns. That's the 7 rules in a nutshell. I will stop there.
I'm just curious though, does that involve commerce as well? Like are the different worlds interoperable in terms of that and DeFi? And
it has to involve commerce. It will increasingly involve DeFi and all of the blockchain technologies. There is so much of a movement from the creators and the consumers to take more control over their identity, over the value of what they produce. And that isn't going away. And the Web3 crowd, they've dubbed it Web3, DeFi, blockchain, NFTs, and all these related technologies, much to the consternation of some other folks who've been working on what they call Web 3.0. So get ready for a little nomenclature confusion. But I think these things ultimately co-evolve and converge anyway. I think the movement toward user-generated content, and again, owning more of that, is going to fundamentally require kind of these, decentralized technologies. But you can't have pure decentralization and have a metaverse, because everyone needs to still communicate through some common set of protocols. Some of this stuff needs to be pushed around, whether it's through peer-to-peer networks or there's still a hybrid with some central technology. And that inevitably involves commerce. If people aren't making money or working on their jobs this way, it's just another entertainment platform. And I don't think that's what most people believe is the be-all and end-all goal of this.
Well, and I think that's like a perfect, like if Unity were to creates a software layer that allows developers to create things that Barmak and John are working in spaces where, to your point, Tony, people are going to have to interact in some way in this space, whether that becomes a metaverse or currently where we're at. What is the user interface? What are the ways we're going to interact? What is the remote engagement? What's the ways to collapse distance between people? So I'd really love to hear from Barmak and John on kind of how they see this evolving, especially around their technologies.
Yeah, John, you want to go first? I can go.
I'm not sure if I have a choice now. Certainly. So what's really interesting, and I literally can't define it any better than it's already been defined about the metaverse, is there's a lot of the central theme around the headsets being key and critical to that as almost a catalyst. And it's really interesting to see with Facebook, now Meta, and the relationship between how they're thinking about this social interaction, having the headsets, the new methodology to interact with the social media outlets, with the e-commerce, with all the ways that you're going to be thinking and interacting with the internet effectively, right? So it's interesting to have that be decoupled in any way, yet it has to be decoupled. So the way that we're looking at this is we're another player in the space. We are providing, rather than the headsets, a way to bring that object into the physical space with those other individuals, but we can all play in that same sandbox, if you will. But putting a headset on, there's obviously a very large barrier to entry for a lot of people to do so, but it does make it an easier interaction and easier point of bringing products to market, because they're smaller, lighter weight, and you're not doing something that has to have such a much higher compute requirement. So that's kind of a little view of the world there, but it's exciting to see so many companies that are now engaging in that space, and it's pretty remarkable having someone like Mark Zuckerberg, and you think about that having him make that statement, bringing so much more interest and focus on this concept of metaverse. Was already there, but he did the same thing with Oculus when he made that acquisition. Then suddenly there's this massive surge of investment that was going in, and it really was a nice catalyst. So it's remarkable to see what he's been able to do.
I would like to think about it, you know, again, there's like many layers of understanding on what is metaverse. I mean, if it's people having digital identities and sort of digital twins and interacting in this virtual environment, well, you know, maybe Facebook and Instagram are already, you know, somewhat of a digital representation that is modified, better version of you on the internet. Except, you know, right now, the entire internet is just a set of lists. You know, anything that you think about is a set of lists that you're scrolling on, right? So you have Facebook, which is a list of profiles. You have lists of pictures like Instagram, list of videos, which is YouTube, list of products, which is Amazon, right? So anything that you think about, it comes down to a set of lists. And I think this new understanding of metaverse is that these lists are going to be transformed into spaces and experiences, right? And so you would have more context around these lists. And you know, to get to that level of immersion that is like very fluid and you almost feel like you're in this digital world, and you have I don't know, this AI assistant instead of Google that you talk to very naturally, and so on and so forth. You know, that's I think somewhat far-fetched. You know, the way that we think about it at Brelyon is like, okay, what is it that the customer has been asking for a long time that you're not getting right now, and how does that relate to the value that we can bring to the customer? And so the way we do that is that, you know, look at the trajectory of your user interface with computers. Okay, so what has been the main ask from customers? Have they been asking for 3D? Have they been asking for, you know, brighter display or curved monitor? And so we realized that, you know, for 3 decades almost, you know, customers have been asking for higher resolution displays, larger screen size, better image fidelity, and so we really focused on increasing your visual bandwidth of the experience with a computer and internet. So that includes giving you that larger field of view that you may have experienced in headsets. And as John mentioned correctly, headset itself is a big, you know, big ask or big barrier to really adoption of these immersive experiences. And so at Brelyon, we're creating basically the world's first headset-less virtual displays, right? So these are portals where you can sit in front of and they feel like a window where you have depth and you have a very large field of view like headset. And so that's kind of what we're working on, and our intention is to initially increase your visual bandwidth of the internet so that we can bring more value, you can see more, you can do more, and that's a great place to start, as opposed to having this vision of, we first need immersion, and then we're going to work out to bring some value out of that immersion. We're really trying to start with value and then, pave the way toward more and more immersion.
Can I jump in here for a second, tie these things together a little bit?
Absolutely.
One of the reasons I was delighted to be on this panel was to be able to share the time with Barmak and John, because I'm just going to say it here for everyone in this group on this call, see how much it makes it on the interwebs, but I have not put a Quest on my face for probably 3 months. Not that I won't, there's some things I love doing in an immersive headset, but what got me into this in the first place was seeing that hologram of Princess Leia in the first Star Wars movie when I was a little kid. And that is the vision that's driven me to continue to pursue 3D and immersive tech. And any innovation we can get in display technology that's either holographic or with larger, surround displays like Barmak is doing, is going to be good for human factors. Ultimately, we want free holography everywhere. We know that's going to take a long time. Free as in it's just unfettered, and it'll all be sort of built into the fabric of our rooms someday, or however that's done. But these are the stepping stones on the way to true immersion in a non-invasive way, where we can have that information at our fingertips, where we are actual magicians, and the other tech that goes along with that, all the AI and faster networking and all the other things that have to happen to make this work. But to me, that's the vision that we should be pursuing, which is, it's hilarious I'm saying this now because now I'm looking at the Q&A and it's saying what's not pie in the sky. But I do think that is the vision that's driving a lot of us here. And that we think that maybe immersive VR is either a waypoint, with a headset, is either a waypoint toward that future, or is a small side channel that's used for very immersive, very deep either entertainment or training experiences, but is not going to be the prevailing mode in a decade.
I think you nailed it, Tony. That's exactly what we believe. We believe that there's a big chasm between that super immersed, experience with VR headset, that's almost dizzying, and you spending 6 hours a day in front of a flat monitor, and we're trying to bridge that chasm.
And Barmak, maybe you can tell us a little bit more about why is it possible now, and it was not possible 5 years ago? Which technology innovation are you bringing on the table? And then
absolutely.
we are going to John about his technology.
Yeah, absolutely. So I can talk about what we're doing and why is it possible now. So we are creating these virtual displays that can give you depth at different layers and kind of feels like a virtual window. And the image size that you can see with these are massive image sizes that is kind of unheard of, to be honest, compared to physical displays. 120 inch, 150 inch. With very high fidelity, so you're talking 8K or even 12K, because you can go to very high field of views. You can actually start to sort of increase that resolution that you can perceive, because you have larger field of view, so you can stack more pixels there. Now, why is it possible now and wasn't possible, maybe a decade ago? Is really the advancement in panel manufacturing, part of which was actually, kicked off by the interest in VR headsets. And as well as better miniaturization of electronics. So that's one part of it. But the other part is actually, believe it or not, chemistry and material sciences. There's a lot of advancement in being able to structure surfaces with much finer details, being able to have control of optical properties of polymers. And that's kind of what's enabling us to be able to craft the light much more effectively and with better performance.
Wonderful. Yeah, so maybe John, tell us more. I see Barmak technology as filling the gap between the experience you can have with our monitors that has been pretty much the same in the past 20, 30 years and VR headset. But at the same time, I see your technology, John, about hologram closing the loop between digital and real life. So tell us more. Why is it possible now? What are you bringing to the table with your technology?
Sure. And Barmak, I love what you were just talking about. It's there's an evolution to display technologies. You think back going from black and white to color and broadcast, and these are hugely transformational revolutions to the way that we were visually communicating. And then you have the big transition into digital technologies and digital displays. And then from that point forward, you actually had a point in time where we have this consistent search for higher fidelity, higher quality, higher resolution to recreate the real thing. And that is a consistent trend through all of visual communication. So with these digital displays, every 7 years, just about, you get about a 4x resolution increase, going from standard def to high def to very creatively full high def, then to 4K, 8K, et cetera. And what's interesting about this is everything beyond full high definition is effectively higher resolution at the appropriate viewing distance than what your eye can see. So what do you do from there? You have then new use cases, things that put the headsets closer to your eyes, things that will go into microfab, things that go into new technologies that Barmak is working on. But after a certain point, those fabs hit a hard limit, and they fundamentally will either hit what the fab limit can do, or you hit the limit of what physics allows you to do with photonics. So the thing that has enabled us to realize resolutions that go multiple orders of magnitudes beyond what any other technology can do is similarly because of innovations in polymers, in materials, in chemistry, in optics. And these are all things that we are building and releasing. So I think it might also be helpful to really differentiate what's different about 2D versus stereoscopic, which is the same thing in headsets, versus holographic. And what it comes down to is it's all photons. It's all the ability to have these wave fronts that are the real thing. So if I hold up, again, very creative, and I'll take the brand name out of here. Okay, it's back to my film days. And you see this water here. Well, obviously you're all seeing it as something 2D on your screen, but what I'm seeing is the light, all these photons interacting, and then my eye is able to focus on the surface. So if you have something stereoscopic, like a VR or AR headset, or like going to the movies or having those glasses on, what you're seeing is a left eye and a right eye. So you get two samples of a wavefront. That is not a hologram. Those are sometimes misrepresented or mistermed as something that is recreating a hologram. That's just stereopsis. Your brain is only firing a fraction of the neural pathways that we've evolved to actually see and require in order to fully understand the world around us. So something that is a real object or a hologram of the real object gives you better memory, better cognition, better true fundamental understanding of the world around you. And that's what we're doing. So all of those key enablers with this constant evolution in the display industry to have higher and higher and higher resolutions, we can leverage all of those benefits and go into things that are modulating literally billions and billions of pixels. So think of things that, if you compare it to like the resolution of your phone, something like this, one of our walls is approximately 80,000 of those crammed into a singular surface. That sounds crazy because it should, but it is then transforming something that otherwise was only giving you 2D or stereo or some other variant of that, and now creating something that is reconstructing the underlying and fundamental wavefront of the real object itself. And you really fundamentally can't tell the difference between the real and the synthetic when you're seeing something that's holographic, because your eye is focusing midair. You reach out, you want to touch the thing. It gives you all of the neural pathways that you would require to understand that object. And it is a very differentiated experience. So bringing that into all of these applications for commerce, for telepresence, for anything that you can imagine, a visual display, and having now the real thing right in front of you. I like the quote from Star Wars. You could have Princess Leia right in the room with you as well. So those are all the key enablers. Those are the things that have really transformed the world, and having technologies and software like Unity that have the underlying software backbone for full real-time interactivity is all converging with enough compute, with enough resolution to make this real today. And to the panelist question about what's realizable in the next 5 years, it won't be a consumer technology in every device, every phone, because the fundamental resolutions require you to go into full true mass production to get to that silicon size and silicon price point. But you will start seeing these in these large entertainment venues and professional and enterprise. And ideally, the next time you see me, I will be projected as a hologram and you won't know the difference.
I would like to also give some parallels to what John is talking about. So I think stereoscopic 3D is overrated and monocular depth or wavefront engineering is kind of underrated. And John is exactly right. You know, right now we're really engineering the light at, you know, hundreds of basically micro radian level. And for previous auto stereoscopic displays, which you may have seen before, you know, those are usually at milliradian, you know, levels of engineering of the light. So we are actually engineering the light at much finer details, which gives you this single eye depth cue, which is one of the depth cues that human eye has, which means that, for example, for Brelyon display or for the light field lab display, even if you close one of your eyes, you still get a sense of depth because your eye is actually focusing to that distance, because the, you know, curvature of the wavefront of the light is engineered correctly.
There's a panel question I just wanted to jump in on about haptics, which we are excited by, because I think the Ashley's question there is completely appropriate. That if you think of the hierarchy of your sensory receptors, vision is considered the most important, like 93% of your brain is operating on the visual stimulus. And then the next most important is touch. So when we're projecting these objects, the uncanny experience of putting your hand through the object itself is, one, incredible, and two, it's lacking the haptic interface. Our Gen 2 will also have singular surface, the ability to have volumetric haptics where you'll touch and feel in midair. So that's getting into, from a customer basis, that's the second most often requested receptor for us. So that is the second product line we're bringing into the market.
Well,
so,
hold on, John. So you're not just tracking the hands, but you're actually giving force feedback?
We will, Gen 2. That's already in development.
Okay,
With
mind
haptic,
blown.
with haptic glove, with some sort of,
no gloves.
Free space midair. We can already levitate some.
I'm just picturing like large fans blowing air currents around or something, but you probably can't even say what you're doing yet. It's just kind of mind blowing.
Mechanical energy versus electromagnetic.
Nice.
well, then to some degree, this steps into some of the challenges that I think Barmak was talking about in terms of being able to do physical things remotely, right? Once you can start to have some sort of haptic sensation. I'm on the board of South by Southwest, so I judge the Innovation Awards, and some of that last year was stepping into that, some of that certainly in the medical field, but it involved a lot of gear, right? And a lot of precision to be able to do that. What you're talking about could open up a whole new way that people could work together. Wow, fascinating.
So I see some stuff in the Q&A. I'm happy to jump in on the one Esther Lim asked.
Esther.
Yeah, Tony mentioned that the metaverse is about communication, but we require common protocols. What's happening in this industry today to address that, to avoid walled garden experiences? Yeah, I mean, great question. There's a lot of, folks, the geezers like myself have been at this for a while, who know that we need that and have enough of experience to know where to start. I think a lot of the newer generation of folks acknowledge the need for that, but don't even know where to start on this stuff because it's just sort of foreign territory. I think folks are going to meet in the middle. There's a lot of calls for interoperability. There are groups spinning up, the Open Metaverse Interoperability Group, for example, largely at this moment populated by people that are a little naive on the tech side, but are well-intentioned. And then there are groups like the Kronos Group, which I'm heavily involved in, which standardizes WebGL, GLTF, which is a file format I helped create, which is, if you know my background, is basically the successful version of VRML. Everyone's using it to move 3D data around the internet. So there are some beginnings of that, but there are some key problems that need to be solved around avatar definition, interoperability, behaviors translating. What do you do with styles if I have a real person that I want to walk into a cartoon world? Messaging protocols, persistence, all the stuff I already mentioned around DeFi ownership and transactions. There's going to be a big soup of all this stuff that I think will be, that's a 5-year thing, back to Gideon's question. I think a lot of this stuff will be settled on and kind of in the early stages of standardization, and there will be several interoperable systems online by then, somewhere in this 3 to 5 year time frame. Given the fact, like you were saying before, John, that Zuck has sort of blessed this whole space. There's going to be a new influx of activity. There will be a bunch of walled garden companies trying to say they're a metaverse or the metaverse or whatever. But then there's just going to be this slightly slower burn on open infrastructure, and it's absolutely going to happen, Esther. And feel free to reach out to me later. We can talk about that. I'm going to start tracking some of this stuff at a deeper level. I just caught wind of what's it called? XR framework, XR engine. A couple of open source sort of attempts to do this in web browsers right now that'll probably hit some ceiling of functionality, but their whole goal is to give you an open set of tools for doing all this from the open source side, not just specs, right? So there's a lot of promising stuff going on there, and it's its own. If you imagine what it took to spec the web and internet and all that, it's multiple, IETF, W3C, Kronos, bunch of groups. If you don't like to watch how the sausage is made, then you maybe just get the digest from some people like us who have to suffer through it, because it just, and it's sausage plus at the speed of drying paint, 3 years, 5 years, 7 years for specs to coalesce, but there is a lot there and it's already in play.
And I'll just jump in off of that. To that end, we actually standardized another standards body called IDEA, and that's with Cable Labs and Charter Communication, Cox Communication, because we're thinking through the integrity of how we're going to support all the different devices, all the different hardware platforms. So it rides on a bit of a different level that post-render. And how are you going to make sure that you have a true mezzanine holographic format that supports everything? So that's something that we have worked towards. It is intentionally, and the entire fundamental premise of it is it has to be an open source. We don't want to limit the content creators. We want to make sure that it is not walled off, as Esther was asking about. So that's something that we're very passionate about, and you can actually check out the standards. We've published a bunch of them already.
I'm willing to go on a limb and make a few 5-year projections to continue on Gideon's question. Yeah, you're welcome, Esther. I think we will see a lot in the realm of AI-assisted 3D content creation and authoring. This is an area that's really interesting to Unity. I mean, we do, our whole goal in life is to democratize content creation, and still, people go on the Unity editor or in painting programs and they spend hours and hours making trees and forests and doing all these sort of repetitive things. And more machine learning can sort of help to the point where I won't say it's going to be at this level yet, but I could talk to my desktop and say, make me a landscape that looks like this. We'll get there. So Unity will invest in artist tools like that. I also think that probably everyone's tired of hearing about 5G, but I think that one, is going to unlock a lot of, it might not be able to deliver light field data fast enough for consumer use yet, John, but it will deliver amazing 3D experiences. And you would think that's going to be, in full deployment within a 5-year time frame. So those are the first ones top of mind. But I was mostly just doing that to kick it off, because I bet these two also have some thoughts about what we can do in the next 5 years.
I think
what do you think?
Yeah, I think, Tony has a great point there. One of the things, when Alessandro, you were asking, what was, what has become possible that, these stuff that me and John are doing is actually now possible and wasn't possible maybe 10 years ago, is also that friction on the content side, which is being somewhat revealed or somewhat, mitigated by the AI and machine learning, where you can, create content much more quicker, and even do some sort of conversion, conversion from 2D to 3D, which has been in the literature for a very long time, but now with machine learning, actually predicting or interpolating some of the view angles for these holograms, it just becomes much more tangible and feasible problem to solve than methods that we had before. So part of what's making this possible is also that advancement in GPU power and the algorithms to be able to convert one content from one format to the other format and so on.
I got another one. This one's a little might be a little self-serving because I just joined as an LP in a music and media entrepreneur fund in New York. And I believe in the next 1 to 2 years, there's going to be some massive disruption in the streaming entertainment platforms because of decentralization. We're looking at a lot of things like that. And that may be only semi-interesting to a deep tech fund like this, but there may be ancillary use cases or related technologies that would be brought to bear when that change starts to happen. I have to be more, I can't be any more specific.
No, I absolutely agree with you.
Yeah.
I agree. We're going to see within the next 1 to 2 years, tremendous disruption, especially around ownership and fan engagement around the artist. It's happening now. John, what about you? What do you see that's not pie in the sky? That's something within the next 5 years, and then maybe we can talk a little bit about pie in the sky.
Well, of course, you're going to see Lightfield Lab totally dominate this market. Of course. What's interesting is asking that question in terms of, is the metaverse going to be fully realized in the next 3 to 5 years? And I think you're going to see the pieces falling into place. You're going to see really a continued evolution of everything that we have today with the way that we're interacting more and more on our devices. And you'll see faster communications with 5G, as was highlighted. You'll see better displays. You'll see better interfaces, better connectivity, but you're not going to see that fully realized science fiction vision, particularly in the consumer space. But we'll get closer and closer and closer. And frankly, I'll just be happy when Siri understands me well enough that I can say, give me directions, and it gives me the right directions and not some other random phone call that it'll make. It's a lot of evolutions that we'll continue to see. And then you have to really think about that longer term vision of what science fiction has promised us. That's when you'll really be seeing those things in the next 10 plus years. And I see a note here, actually, I'll jump in for Ashley about contact lenses. Yeah, there's a number of companies that are doing that with micro LEDs, and super cool with, if you know, Mojo Vision and those guys, and love the team over there. Those are very hard technologies to do in a visually high fidelity way, particularly given the way that your eye works and the biology of how your eye has diffractive limits, and then pixels have diffractive limits, and how do you power them? How do you transmit data to them? Which they're working towards solving those things. Not everybody wears contact lenses. Not everybody wears glasses. So you always have that as a question. And if there was a barrier to entry, and I'm probably going out on a limb here, by putting something on your head, having somebody put something in their eye might also be a barrier to entry if you don't already wear contact lenses. So it really depends on, do you believe that you can ask your customer to do something that is different than what they do in their daily life? And our answer is always no. If they don't want to do it, you can't enforce some new behavior. They have to want to do those behaviors. So for the percentage of the population that doesn't wear glasses, doesn't wear contact lenses, it's a big ask. It's a tough ask to ask them to start doing that. But that is a different way to achieve things, but they're still not holographic. They would still be in the monoscopic or stereoscopic domain.
As a former contact lens wearer who then ultimately got LASIK, +1.
That says it all right there, right?
Yeah. But that's just me, maybe.
I can
but
talk a little
Ashley
bit.
does one real quick, since I got the mic for a second, Barmak. Ashley brings up a good one though about audio. I mean, did we just see the Apple Music and Dolby Atmos announcements and the spatialized audio in the AirPods Max or whatever they're called? So there's a lot going on in audio too, and we shouldn't neglect that. And I think that's going to be fundamental to immersion. Maybe just behind haptics, John. I'd argue with that second most important thing and say audio is actually even more important, but they run close to each other. That was it, Barmak.
With spatialized audio, even Philip Rosedale, Second Life, has a new platform out to simulate what normal sound would be like at a cocktail party, proximity based and all of that. Certainly we know we have challenges with that, just even with Zoom and virtually, to be able to create spatialized sound. Originally, maybe going back to Cisco's Telepresence, where they tried to do that. But I think that's going to be absolutely critical as we start to move into what determines to be an immersive experience. We know sound can pull you out of that. If it's not right.
And apologies, Barmak, and I just want to comment. Tony, you're absolutely right about sound. Our customer base already has quite a bit of the spatial sound addressed and solved. So you are absolutely correct.
So in the context of your customers,
that's correct.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that I realize I probably should have made that much more clear. So thanks. Yeah.
Barmak, you had a comment?
Yeah, so I think with regard to future, I can add a little bit there. I think this whole bigger vision of metaverse will probably come down to few sort of killer apps or few case scenarios where they become so dominant that it maybe even overshadow this entire sort of idea of metaverse. But meanwhile, I think if you look at our life today, we're sitting in front of monitors 6 hours a day, every day probably, and you're doing Zoom calls and such. And I think maybe the first thing that would be different in 5 years, I'm looking forward to see what Apple is going to put out in terms of the augmented reality headsets, and how is that going to play with as an accessory to the cell phone. So that might be something that starts to bring some change in our behavior, because remember, as John also mentioned, it's very hard to actually change the consumer behavior or human behavior around the way they work or the way they interact with computers. And so it's a huge ask. It's a huge ask that many companies like Meta, that I was head of optics of, or Magically, for example, figured out that it's a very painful, figured it out very painfully that it's not going to work actually if you want to suddenly disrupt the human behavior. So there's this lag in the system, which is the human behavior of adoption of technology. It doesn't matter like what kind of a cool technology you may have in the lab, as long as people cannot adopt that, and there's not much content for it, it's going to sort of become in this island that it limits its application. So I think like in the coming years, we're still going to be sitting at our desk, working for long hours, but maybe when we are traveling, we'll have these kind of like pair of AR glasses that we connect to our iPhones or Android phone, and that gives us some functionality. But for desktop, I believe that Brelyon would be a solution that is significantly better than the desktop experience you have today. And so we have a bunch of partnerships with some of the graphics card companies and so on that we're going to announce around CES, and so we're pretty pumped about that, and how that's going to change the way, at least enhances your experience quite a bit without asking you to change your behavior.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I mean, standard behavioral modeling it's much smarter to try to make things easier before moving to change and increase motivation, right?
Yeah.
So if you can find a way to get people into an immersive space in a much easier way than to, whatever, jack in maybe, where you need all the gear and everything, then you're going to find people acting in accordance with that behavior quicker than if you had to actually motivate them more. I
think it's also very hard to predict right now that, which of those values that maybe 3D has or immersion has in terms of metaverse kind of experience,
Right.
which of those would materialize in an application or in a setting where it would generate a lot of revenue or a lot of value for people that are using it. Certainly it's not going to be just entertainment. It has to be some sort of like transaction or self-expression or something that is a little bit deeper and more sort of mechanical than just entertainment.
Maybe Tony, we can just quickly, thank you, Barmak, that's great. Go to Andrew's question. I think I know your answer to this, and then Alessandro can wrap up with a bigger question.
All right, Andrew, can we go back to the earlier question by Kenny? Is there one metaverse or many? Yes, you already know my answer, but let me elaborate. Geopolitics aside, there are as many metaverses as there are internets. There's only one. It's the public commons. Anything behind corporate firewalls, call it something else. Anything that claims to be a metaverse that is, public and open in terms of access by consumers, but is not interoperable, is not the metaverse. It's a theme park. That's my answer.
I like that.
Okay.
There's also a couple of Q&A questions that I could touch on just for a second. Mark is asking about the bypassing the neural pathways and matrix style jacking right into the brain to see. And the answer is yes, there is work that has happened in that space to go directly to the visual center of the brain. You're a long ways away from that being something more than just some sense of intensity. But there is a lot of work doing that to convert those chemical signals into something your brain can actually translate. And then there was another question by Esther here about the environmental impact. And I think that's for you and I, Barmak. There's a lot of more detailed questions there in terms of what they're asking for, but fundamentally, we're not doing anything that you wouldn't see in a commercial display, if that's the question.
Right.
Yeah.
Awesome. So regarding the metaverse, we learned today that it's a mix of 2D content, 3D content. It's also a lot about experience. And currently, probably with VR technologies, they isolate users. So it's probably not the best technology. And we think that better hologram or better ultra reality display will unlock a lot of opportunities. A question that we have for you guys to wrap up this webinar is where do you think would be the world in 10 years that people do not believe will be possible today? Give us your prediction.
I can start on that.
Go ahead, Barmak, after you.
Yeah, sure. So I mean, I think in 10 years, yeah, headsets are going to be more around. Probably they will come for free as an accessory with your cell phone package when you get them, and there's definitely going to be more augmented reality, virtual reality around, and so there will be some of these immersive experiences around. But your desktop experience or your experience with screens is also going to be very different than what you experience today with the 2D flat image. That's kind of my prediction.
John?
I think I'm going to have Tony go first.
We're making a lot less stuff and putting it in a lot fewer packages and shipping it on a lot fewer planes to save the planet. We're traveling less for business to save the planet. More stuff will happen locally. Cities will get smarter, mediated by all kinds of digital twin technologies. And we will have the metaverse as an interface to all of this. It will be an enhancement to our physical world, as well as a wonderful place to escape and just communicate in small groups whenever we feel like it. And in general, the global forces of things like pandemic and climate change are going to force this upon us.
Thank you, Tony. All right, John, take us home.
I figured I wasn't going to be able to trump Tony on this thought process here.
You got this, man. You got it.
So it's interesting with COVID, with the pandemic, where does that go? Where does the future go? I actually think you're going to see much more of the resurgence of people going back into those environments, back into theater, back into concerts, back into the public shared experience, as if it's a reversal of all the things that you've seen in the COVID world. So I think you will find over the next, well, I'll call it 1 to 3 years, that the amount of telepresence, the amount of virtual Zoom, virtual things that we're doing, you'll actually have people wanting to go back into the office after they get over that initial, you got to move back into the town that your company works in. That seems to be a separate pandemic, if you will. So it's interesting to think that that's almost counterintuitive to the metaverse, but it is also interrelated, that those will become tools that we use as part of working all together.
Awesome. All right, this concludes our webinar. I want to thank you guys, Tony, John, Barmak. It was a true privilege to have you here with us. Thank you, our audience and attendees. We appreciate your questions. And we will see you probably in 2 weeks with the next webinar, and happy holidays.
Right.
Happy holidays.
Thank you so much.
Thank
See you in
you.
the
That was
metaverse.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Yeah.